Did anybody ever check on the guardrail to see if it's okay, James? You got to laugh about it or you're going to cry. All right, so here is the infamous or famous guardrail injury right here. And this is something to where at the time people go, why didn't you just tell Terry no? Can you imagine 1997 telling a legend like Terry Funk and you have your first major push and this guy is putting you over all over the place and he wants to do this spot and you trust this guy. You have to trust your body with your opponent. And at this point, I did trust Terry to hit me in my back area. You can see right here, he was going to try to hit my back area, but this part of the guardrail, see the it did hit my back, but my upper back and then the top bar hit the guardrail, or top bar of the guardrail hit me, or I hit the guardrail. Did anybody ever check on the guardrail to see if it's okay, James? You got to laugh about it or you're going to cry. There, right there. So as we fast forward, there's another angle right there. Now you can see he's trying to aim for my back. So this is not Terry's fault. He did not intentionally do this to me. By the way, look at where Sandman is. Sandman has said a couple times if my body wasn't there to protect him, he could have been impaled with this part right here. So just don't break my nose on the lockup and we'll be even. How's that, Sam? All right, let's go to the next camera angle because this is where it's going to be paused. Right there. I mean, we call him Hack. Hack, aka Sandman, he's in a pretty vulnerable position as well. So I don't know what that would have done to him if Terry threw it on him, but that's right there. And as we go forward from here, I'm going to show you that's what I got afterwards, not from the neck surgery. This was from being intubated and the vocal cord injury. And right here is a drainage tube and stitches where the thyroplasty is. That's the second one, not the first one. That was later on in 2006, 2007, where my voice started to go again. But right there is the result. Everybody thinks this is the ACF scar, but the ACF scar is down by my collarbone. This is the vocal cord implant, the thyroplasty.
So I'm going to add a little bit of context to this. So the Buffalo Invasion, Buffalo, New York, that's the event. It's at the, how do you pronounce it? The Flickinger?
Or Flickinger Center.
The Flickinger Center, May 17th, 1997, in front of 1,697 people. The match itself was ECW World Champion Terry Funk versus Raven with Lupus and Chastity. I mean, Lupus, there's a name from the past. Stevie Richards, of course, and the Sandman in an elimination match in 10 minutes 41. Before we discuss the guardrail actually landing on you, what did Terry actually tell you beforehand? So there's obviously a conversation that you alluded to beforehand. Terry says, can I do this? Had you ever done anything like this before with the guardrail as well?
No. We've done guardrail spots and stuff like that, but I never did the thing like, yeah, I know Crowbar loves to do, take the backdrop onto the guardrail onto the outside, or people get whipped into the corner instead of a table, the guardrail's there and they kind of bounce out of it, or they use ladders like in ECW. This was my first kind of exposure to this type of spot. And I've been hitting the back with chairs and stuff like that. And that's the way it was presented to me, like, Terry, hey, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to tickle, but it's essentially a very heavy chair shot to your back. Now, you saw how tall that guardrail is because it has to keep people in that are seated or even standing. It's probably between, what would you say, waist to maybe sternum height, depending upon your height. So it's pretty thick that way, or pretty tall. So when it came down, Terry did aim for my back, but then that big part, the round part of it at the top of the guardrail is what hit me. So yeah, it was basically just going to be kind of a back chair shot, but it wasn't. It was a little bit more than that.
So we saw how it went completely wrong. Just weeding it out exactly. How did the guardrail hurt you completely? So it's the thick portion of the bar lands straight on your neck, and you save Hack the Sandman at the same time. What's the immediate sensation of the injury?
Very hot fire throughout my body, and then nothing. Like a rush of like that fire that probably people feel whenever they get injured or break something or tear something, or it just feels like your body's like 1,000 degrees for like a split second. And then I went to the mat and I couldn't feel my arms, couldn't feel my legs. My breathing was very labored, not just from the match, but going into some kind of shock. And also, if you can't move your arms and your legs, the 1 hour I couldn't move them felt like an eternity. And thank God as time went on, I started to get some feeling back. But there was damage done. That was the beginning of the end of this type of push in my career. This really did set me off on as a 23, 24-year-old kid, making very stupid, rash decisions, not knowing and feeling like everything is the finality. You know what I mean,
Mhm.
James? Everything's the end of the world when you're 24. I didn't have the perspective nor the maturity to say, okay, this is the way the business works. I'm going to come back. I got my feeling back. It's going to be a long road. Instead, I made a lot of decisions that probably completely detoured my career, but on a positive note, it taught me a lot of hard lessons. Like we talked about earlier, about being at the very top and being pushed and then being at the bottom. If I was constantly being pushed, I probably wouldn't have, I didn't back then, but I do now appreciate the time and the money that are invested into a character, what a push on TV really means, what microphone time means, what being allowed to have creative control somewhat means. I didn't have any appreciation of that during that time in 1997, but I sure as hell gained it when I came back.
Just what actually happens at the end of the match then? So you pin Sandman with the Stevie kick at 10:30, then Funk lands the guardrail on you. Is the match just then after that cancelled?
Well, it was supposed to be over anyway. So whether they wanted it to be over or not, the match was over. And unfortunately, if it wasn't over, I feel like Terry would have tried to pick me up, not realizing I was hurt, but he sure wouldn't have, like we saw the AEW spot where the kid knocked down the middle and they're doing spots around him and dragging him and doing all that stuff. With this, Terry realized after the pin that I was hurt really bad. And I think if he tried to pick me up and I just wasn't moving and I said, I can't move, he would have put me back down and pinned me.
Mm.
I, you know, Terry wouldn't have went that far to get his stuff in. He really did have a very big heart and he cared. I mean, he's crazy. He's there and you got to fight for your life when you're in the ring with Terry Funk. But he was also one of the kindest, most compassionate people outside the ring that I was ever around.
So Terry knew you were hurt pretty much immediately. He didn't try and do anything else with you. How did you communicate
No,
this?
after he covered me, he turned around and I think he could see it on my face, or maybe I even said, I can't feel my arms and legs. I don't even know if I could verbalize it, but you have to imagine, and I hope everybody can only imagines it and never experiences it. Time slows down to a crawl, and you're like, I'm never going to be able to walk again, never be able to grab or write or maybe it's a good thing. I'm never going to be able to do a podcast or a show ever again. But it definitely was the scariest moment of my life.
Did ECW have any provisions in place for such an injury? Because I mean, it's pretty slapdash. I'm sure the backstage in ECW compared to what WWE, for example, is in 2024. But did they always have EMTs on standby, and were they properly trained to deal with this kind of thing?
ECW had they called it damage control or something like that, where they had a husband and wife team that has EMTs at the arena and other places. In New York, it was different. They had to have, you have the commission, had to have an ambulance, had to have a doctor that kind of checked you out to make sure you're okay. You had people on staff. So there was an ambulance, I believe, either there or close by. There was medical personnel in the building, but that was strictly because of the New York State Athletic Commission and not because of ECW. Most times it was like a mash unit with these 2 EMTs just trying to kinda tape everybody together to get out there and wrestle. So, no, they didn't have that kind of WWE type of, doctors in every town, ambulance on every show, full-time trainers, and stuff like that. They didn't have anything like that.
So what's the process of you being taken to the back and any treatment at the arena before getting whisked off to hospital? How did they look after you?
Oh, they took me right to the hospital from the ring. They had a stretcher come out, put me on the backboard on the stretcher, and put me in the ambulance. It wasn't any coming back and sitting in my I couldn't move. So that whole hour, I wasn't in the ring, I think, for the whole hour, but by the time I got to the hospital, I started to get a little bit of feeling back.
Could you breathe okay throughout? Or
No. No, but I was blown up from the match too. You make it sound like it was a super short match, but it felt pretty
yeah.
long. And you got 4 guys in there, everybody's working their ass off. So I don't know between being blown up, being winded from the actual match, going into shock, and also maybe my body got shocked from the they call it transient quadriplegia, where eventually you get your feeling back, maybe an hour, a day, a week, a month. That's what they were saying. We didn't know when I was gonna regain all the feeling and the movement back in my body, but breathing was very labored, but I couldn't tell you the origin, if it was, you know, physical, medical, or psychological or emotional at the time.
So you get to the hospital, I imagine, run through a battery of tests. What were the tests? Obviously an X-ray, but what other tests did they do before they could tell you exactly the nature of
I,
the injury?
I'm, well, I'm pretty sure X-ray, MRI, CAT scan, all 3 of those probably, to see what the damage was. They kept me overnight. They wanted to see, if I was going to gain my feeling back, which I did. I was still a little shaky. Obviously, dude, I had such a headache, such a migraine. I mean, yeah, what a mystery. How did that happen? Uh, and of course, like in the weeks following, I was asked by a lot of people in the locker room, "Hey, brother, did you get any medicine at the hospital? Did you get anything for the pain?" Because I was never a pain pill guy or any of that stuff. Um, but I didn't. And I got heat for at the time. I said, "No, I didn't even ask for a script." They're like, "What are you crazy?"
Did you have any like lasting nerve damage from it?
Well, I bet I did, but this was a whole from May 1997 to December. You got to think. I went to WCW in July. That didn't pan out. I kept getting stingers and it kept getting worse and worse. Then I went back to ECW for the one match against Chris Chetty. I suffered the stingers again. Then on December 22nd, 97, I had the anterior cervical fusion. Then everything just started. Like this entire time up until the end of the year was just like a whirlwind of physical injuries, emotional distress, bad decisions, one after the other. And then, of course, at the end of the year, I lost what I thought I'd never lose, and that was my voice. So 3 months, I couldn't even talk. I had to write on a notepad until I got that thyroplasty.
Now, you had one televised match, you rightly say, Chris Chetty. Just so people know as well,
Mhm.
you also wrestled Jerry Lynn and Mikey Whipwreck after the WCW run. But as I say, the ECW and WCW thing of later 97, that is going to be a video all to itself. What was the exact nature of the neck injury?
It was initially one level was herniated, C5-6. I kept wrestling and kept wrestling and kept wrestling, and that became C5-6, 6-7, and they believe I broke my T1 during this particular thing as well. That wasn't as bad as the herniations, and that's what I ended up getting, the fusion with the hardware, and then 3 to 4 months later, had the hardware taken out.
I don't know what a T1 is. What's a T1?
It's a bone, like a kind of a lateral bone, I believe, underneath there. So those little things that come out from your vertebrae, I think, are the T
Oh,
things.
like the spiky,
Like
the
I
almost
said,
like spiky
you
thing.
you're asking a guy. I played a doctor on TV, James. Come on, I played a doctor, and I was a therapist. I wasn't a orthopedic surgeon or a
Yeah, but at that
neurosurgeon.
point, you could write prescriptions. You would have been the biggest hit in
For Dr.
ECW. Yeah.
Stevie? Well, Dr. Stevie did actually. After Dr. Stevie had general anesthesia on somebody, which was the $1 million dream, I would put the prescription pad in their mouth or a paper. I'd write them a script.
So,
Dr. Stevie, that's a whole video, a whole episode for
oh
another
god,
time. I
oh
loved
god, yes.
playing Dr.
God, yeah.
Stevie.
So the surgery itself, what did that? The initial surgery, I should say. What did that entail? Or did you even have surgery to fix your neck?
No, I did. On December 22nd, 1997, I had the anterior cervical fusion on those levels. And that's when they stick a tube down your throat when you're under anesthesia. It's called intubation. That's when they damaged my vocal cords. Funny part is, we talked about the MLB 2K, right? That didn't win the $1 million for the perfect game. I could have sued the doctor in the hospital, but one person before me had the exact thing happen too. They got like $2.5 million back then. Then they put it in the waiver. Bad timing.
Oh, dearie me. I tell you, that's another video.
But you know what? You know what, dude? If I had gotten that lawsuit or they settled, I probably wouldn't have the work ethic I have today. I wouldn't go back to the business. I wouldn't be able to kind of rewrite my career to a certain extent. So that's fine. I don't look at it like, "Oh, I lost out on that and I should have got that." I gained so much more after that to this day. If I didn't have a career after that, we might not be talking today.
But here's the thing, though. So you've got several fractures in your neck, yet they don't elect to give you surgery at the time. Did they know you were going to go back to wrestling?
Are you talking about from here in
Yeah.
May? Well, dude, I didn't have any health insurance at the time, and I didn't know the extent of the injury outside of the hospital visit. So it was one level. So I was like, well, I might be able to get by with that and keep wrestling. Then when I went in for the surgery, because there were so many stingers, so much going on, that's when I discovered it was 2 levels and possibly that T1 break. I didn't know for 7 months.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Did any doctor ever tell you that you really had to retire? This was a career-ending injury.
Yeah, they told me, like, with the surgery, you shouldn't wrestle after this. You're done." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm done." And then after some soul searching and after saying, you know what I mean? I matured a lot. I got a little bit more perspective during this time, but I didn't want to go out that way. I wasn't going to go in there and try to go out like Randy the Ram and the wrestler, but I was trying to rewrite what I could. And also that changed my attitude about serving others, contributing, being a little bit more giving and selfless in the business because I was up high, at least in my career. And then I went all the way down the rock bottom. And I learned a lot of great lessons.
What were your limitations immediately after the injury, and what were your limitations physically after surgery?
Limitations after the injury was just stingers all the time. My work was affected, but not too much. A lot of the stuff in July that I did with Raven and WCW when I went there was in the crowd, promos, sitting there. So I had about a month or maybe 6 weeks to kind of heal. But once I started taking bumps, I felt it right away. After the surgery, they grafted a bone from my hip in order to do the graft on the fusion in my neck. And that hurt worse than the neck. I was walking with a walker, then a cane. That took a few months. And then when I thought I was completely done and retired, I went back to school for computer networking and all this nerdy stuff that I love to this day. And I started working independence here and there. And then fast forward June 1999, WWE, when I was ready to say, you know what, I'm full in on computer networking, IT. I'm going back to college. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree. They called me and they said, "Get back here. Get the old Mortal Kombat. Get over
Get
here."
over here. Fine. Fine
Yeah.
film, the
So
first one as well.
all you got to do to be a success in everything, anything, is just in your mind say, "I'm completely done." And then the universe will hand you your career back.
How long did you start testing out the neck and start taking bumps again after the initial injury?
Well, I ran out of money. I was broke. I had nothing. I had nothing. And I can tell a story about that when we sit down. So I had to work. I worked, and it taught me how to be a better worker and protect my neck because I had to. Um, I started working NWA and a lot of local indies in the tri-state area up in the Northeast, even Connecticut, Massachusetts, mostly Philly, Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. Uh, and I would just work, and guys would be great about not going after my neck until I got to a point maybe about a year after the surgery. I said, "Hey, maybe you can go after my neck a little bit and we'll see how it is." So the next 6 months, up until 6, 7 months until WWE signed me, my neck was felt like it was getting stronger. And then they gave me a physical and all these other things, and apparently said, "All right, you're okay to at least come in and we can take a look at you."
Oh,
Now, I didn't fly to Pittsburgh and do everything they do today. They just got the report from my doctor, and then they checked me out my first day, in Chicago, I believe, when I debuted with Mimi on Sunday Night Heat and kicked Al Snow. That was before we tried to murder Pepper, remember at
Oh God, yeah.
SummerSlam? But yeah, they felt pretty confident that I could at least perform, or maybe they thought, "Hey, in 6 months, if he's done, we'll just release him."
As I say before, we're going to be talking about WCW and the ECW thing. It's another date in time. But one more thing that relates to the neck injury is the throat surgery. And I find it hilarious that WCW hired you and like protected you in the first weeks by just having you do promos with Raven, and then your voice starts going as well. So I don't know if that counts as irony or not, but
No, my voice didn't go until after the surgery. I was already gone
ah,
from WCW, gone from ECW, essentially done. That was after all that. I still had my
yeah.
voice up until the surgery in December.
So with the throat surgery as well that relates to the neck surgery, take us through that.
Well, the throat surgery, there's 2 rounds of it. There was the big one, March 1998. I got the thyroplasty in Philadelphia. I'm just saying that because the next one was actually from the inventor at Mass General in Massachusetts. That was the first one. And then I was training with Shane McMahon, and Shane was doing a lot of chokes and UFC stuff. We talked about that before. And it ended up doing damage to the implant. So I had to go multiple surgeries almost every week, many ones to open up my airway in order to do the big one, which was replacing the implant. And guess what the date was, by the
Um,
way? December 22nd.
ah,
For some for some odd reason, December 22nd has been a big surgery date. I've had 3 surgeries on December 22nd. So as my old Italian parents would say, you got to play that lottery number.